Thanks everyone for coming today. My name is Ben Shine from Domo, and I'm going to be talking today about how data is a hot mess, so let's cook. And so sort of a little bit of a play on words, but I'll get into what I mean by that and what I think we can learn. So just quickly, a little bit of history about myself. I joke it's 20 years of making a mess with data, making a messy kitchen, so to speak. And so I started out not studying anything about data. I got a degree in philosophy, politics, and economics. I think Oxford has ethics, politics, and economics, so similar, and or philosophy. And then I went and worked at a software startup. So I started making a mess. I started making a mess with data. I started making a mess doing everything at a startup, even cleaning the bathrooms, right? And so that led me to go back to business school thinking that I was going to run away from all this technology. I ended up at Target, the almost $100 billion retailer in the US. And I spent the first half of my career at Target in finance, and I always joke I just broke everything. Whatever I got, SAS, Excel, Tableau, MicroStrategy, any data tool I got, I pushed the envelope, tried to break it really, and eventually realized that maybe I shouldn't run away from technology, found my way back to data analytics teams where I could actually build bigger envelopes, not just push the envelope. And then spent the last half of my time there on different data analytics teams. First focused on the digital business on Target.com, and then focused more enterprise-wide as a center of excellence at all data. And one of the things that I realized while I was at Target is that the tools were only part of the equation, right? I could have all these tools, but there was something special about how you got people curious about data. And that's how I framed up my move to Domo 3 years ago, was that I really wanted to create a practice around data curiosity, to think about what are those elements that help culture move, what was it that got us to grow Domo to 6,000 monthly unique users at Target. It wasn't just about software, it was about those cultural elements. And so I've spent the last 3 years as Vice President of Data Curiosity. It's one of the best titles out there, I think. I love it, I don't think I could ever get rid of it. It's a great conversation starter. But really in that role, I work in the office of the CTO as a data culture and a product evangelist. I get to come and talk to people like you. I get to write, I get to coach our customers and our prospects, and it's been a great journey. And so just for a minute, a little bit about Domo. I think you'll find most of this is not directly about Domo, more about how we deal with these cultural elements. Domo was founded in 2010. We have over 2,000 customers. More importantly, we actually have 450 CEOs that are actually using our product, some of them daily, some of them multiple times a day, which really speaks to, how do we engage with people? What are those cultural elements? And every day we query 100 trillion rows of data, right? Again, useful data, data being acted upon, data in the business. And so, we've been doing that for a while. I've been doing this with Domo for 3 years, but recently I think we've sort of been acknowledged more by the analyst community, where we've been a challenger this year in the Gartner Magic Quadrant, also leader in the Forrester Wave, and so that has been sort of a fun part of our journey to watch. So, what are we really trying to do, right? And when I go out and I talk to customers, I talk to prospects, I think what our mission is to really change the way that organizations access and act on data. And I'll tell you that's actually a lot harder than what a lot of companies do, a lot of the people out here do, right? If I wanted to just be only the best data visualization platform or only the best data virtualization platform, that's a much easier task. What I'm trying to do, what our organization is trying to do is change the way data flows through organizations, change that cultural element, and that's a lot harder. And so the way we often talk about it, and I know B was handing out some of it, is this idea of modern BI for all. And that phrase is important to me for a couple reasons. One is the modern part, right? It implies that there's a legacy, an old way of doing things within BI, within data and analytics that needs to change. And then the for all part, for me, has two meanings or two dimensions it works on. One is, it's for all parts of the organization, right? This is not a marketing solution. This is not only for the top 5 priorities versus number 10 or 20. It's for everyone, and it's for all types of personas, right? So if I'm a data scientist, if I'm a business user, if I'm in a factory, I need to develop my analytics around all those people. And so this is a pretty tall task. So why is it we talk about food? Could be the question, right? And so one of the things I've learned in the 3 years doing this at Domo is that analogies can be powerful. They can be powerful to help teach us. They can also be powerful to just help you think differently about some of these problems. And so, I sit through a lot of these sessions, as you have all. Part of what I aim to do when I come here is to help you think a little bit differently, maybe just give you a different way to frame it. And so that's where we decided, as we were talking through this and looking at different ways that we've thought about data, to really try to use this analogy of food and how a kitchen's organized to help teach us about some of what's going on out there. And so I will start with saying I am not a professional chef, but we did do a little research to think about how a kitchen works. And so if anyone is an expert in these things, you can come up and certainly tell me that I'm wrong. But wanted to just take a little bit of a look at what does a kitchen look like? And what does that look like, and what can that tell us about data? So if we think about a kitchen, especially a professional kitchen, there's sort of a natural chaos to it, right? There's lots of things going on. You're trying to serve multiple tables, trying to bring together multiple ingredients. You're trying to use different cooking methods, right? It's not just, I'm not doing one thing. I'm not just, souffling it or doing whatever it is. I need to do all those together. And I need to make multiple dishes for multiple people with multiple preferences and deliver all those consistently to the business, right? And so, there we go. So part of that chaos that you might see in a kitchen with a mess everywhere, it needs governance, just the way that data does. And so if we look at the history of how kitchens have evolved, I think it's easy for us to say a restaurant is just, it's a commonplace thing, but really it's a relatively recent innovation in how people eat, right? And so it used to be maybe you never went to a restaurant or you had a private chef, or it might have been that you went to a restaurant, you ate whatever was given to you, right? That's just how it was. But we know that restaurants have evolved, right? So they've moved to a place where I can eat from a vast menu, I can have it cooked to my requirements, to my taste, I can get different meals and they can arrive hot right when I need them, right when I want them, right? And we're constantly evolving. I even remember in 1999, the first time I ever came to London, I was in university, and I remember going to Wagamama and thinking it was so cool that they put in the order at your table, right? And so that was 1999. Obviously, we've come a long way with delivery and all those different kinds of things, but they've evolved to try to manage that complexity, just like we try to do with data. And so this is one model of a restaurant. So this is Brigade de Cuisine, sort of a standard restaurant model, where you have a customer, the waiter obviously gives you the order. The waiter's going to give the order to the head chef, who's going to call out the order and talk to all the chef de partie, the station chefs. They all yell out, like we've seen in the TV shows, "Yes, chef," when they get the command, and they're each specialized, right? Each one of those chefs is the sauce chef, or the vegetable, or the meat, or the pastry, right? And so they're all focused on their own thing, but they're also using common assets like a pantry, a fridge, and a freezer, and they have to work together to get it done. They're going to pass the stuff back to the head chef, and the head chef, she's responsible for passing it back, for making sure there's quality there, right? And so as this comes to life, right, there's lots of communication, there's lots of governance, it's a way to organize the chaos in the kitchen. And you can imagine though, right, this is just one approach, right? If I was going to go try to open up a stall in Borough Market, it's probably not going to be like that, right? And so sometimes though, we might try to force a system that's more complex onto a simpler situation, like a stall in Borough Market or a food truck back in the States, which are very popular. Or, we might have to think about delivery. We might have to think about HelloFresh and other models, right? So that's part of what we need to do, is take the goodness of a model, of an approach to bring some governance to the chaos and really continue to evolve it. And so data is also a hot mess. I think, if you've worked with data for 20 years or for a long time like I have, you feel this, right? And why is it a hot mess? I have lots of different data, but it's also because I've spent lots of money buying lots of fancy tools and freezers and stoves and special cooking utensils, and somehow I'm still not getting my meals out, right? I'm still not able to deliver the meal or the data and the insight that my organization needs, right? And it can feel like this big pot of stuff, right? And so I'm just sitting there and I'm stirring my data pot, and there's more data coming in. Maybe someone runs over and pours something into my pot when I'm not looking, right? So all of a sudden it changes and you're like, what's wrong with my recipe? Why isn't this working? Someone turns up the heat. COVID comes and everything bubbles over, right? And so this is the chaos that I think we often see. I think if you're working in data, you do that, and that's part of what we want to talk about, how to bring some order to it. And so I will come back at the end, I promise, and share sort of 7 lessons I've learned from the data kitchen, and get more to this analogy, but just a couple points on my thoughts as we were, again, looking at this framework, trying to use the kitchen to learn. There's a couple things that came to mind. So the first thing is I had this image of sitting in a restaurant, maybe in London. I'm a big fan of Ottolenghi. I don't know if anyone else knows those restaurants. But, and what if I walked to the kitchen and just started cooking on my own? How would that head chef feel? But the reality is that sometimes how we feel as data professionals when someone tries to cook on their own, right? It's like, why are you coming into my kitchen? Why are you coming back here and trying to cook? And so we have to think about why are they doing that? You know, sometimes in restaurants you might, you know, have a salad bar, maybe pre-COVID, or you might have some dishes that the waiter prepares at the table, and it might not really be because that's how it has to happen, but it's sort of thinking about how do I make someone feel part of the process? How do I show them it's fresh? How do I help them understand how this salad's being made or this guacamole is being made? And that might evolve even further, right? There's plenty of gadgets today that 10, 15, 20 years ago only were in professional kitchens, and now everyone can have in their home, whether it's an espresso maker or other tools. And so we have to get comfortable with that idea that just like with the kitchen, you sort of have some tools that people that aren't chefs are going to start using. The other thing that really hit me as I thought about this dynamic relative to cooking is this idea of having these shared resources and how we use them, right? So if I take flour and I put it in the freezer, what's going to happen? It's ruined, right? And it's not because my flour is bad. It's not because my freezer isn't working. It's because I put flour in the freezer. And the same thing's going to happen if I try to put ice cream in my pantry, right? And so too often I find our conversations are arguing about, but we have the best freezer. It doesn't matter if you have the best freezer or the best data technology if you keep on putting flour in the freezer. And it's the same thing with our people and our teams, right? So if I ask my pastry chef to cut vegetables, it might not be that good of cut. It's not because they're not a good pastry chef. It's not because the vegetables aren't good. It's because I didn't ask the right person to do the job. And so I think those are some lessons we can get from how this kitchen is set up. And I'll come back and share a little bit more about sort of tying into that food analogy and what's there. And so I wanted to diverge a little bit and talk more about how we embrace this chaos of data, right? I'm a messy data person, and so that's part of what we need to do and what I try to do in my work at Domo. And so just to quickly outline a little bit of how we think about that modern BI for all and this idea of governance. And again, you can go back, I think, often, you know, having been at a place like Target, everyone tells me their food is great. Everyone tells me the dish is going to work. I'm going to tell you that. I'm telling you, go back to our booth. They can show you it and show you that it's actually the real deal. But some of how we think about it around these 3 pillars of modern BI for all. Data agility, which is one of the things I really pushed at Target. At Target, I have talked about 3 parts of data agility: speed to market, scalability, and ability to collaborate and share information, right? And too often those things are too hard, and people even sometimes have spent years and they're almost in trauma out of this process of not being agile, right? So we almost have to be data therapists with them and help them get out of this malaise of everything being slow. The second piece of data literacy is really not just about education, right? I worry that people see data literacy and you just say, okay, well, we have to do better education. It's about making it easy. It's about making it so that I don't have to educate. How do I make the data consumable, relevant, and useful at its core? And the last thing is about intelligent action, right? How can I move from just reporting, from being reactive, to be more proactive, to alert, to leverage data science, to think beyond sort of the 4 walls of my headquarters and think of how am I sharing information out with other people, and that becomes a big piece of it. And so, again, I encourage you to go back and look at our booth, see what's going on, and learn more about these 3 pillars here. And so, often, you know, what I see happening with governance in the data space is, in this traditional sense, in this non-modern sense, it's all about locking people down, right? What data can be used, what I can ask, what resources. And it's important to acknowledge this all comes from very good intentions, right? I don't want to stand here and say we shouldn't be thinking about security or GDPR or whatever it is. But the issue is we end up with this false sense of security, even with those good intentions. right? So I'm pushing people out of my systems. I'm pushing people to Excel. I'm pushing people to places I don't have visibility into what's going on, and that's not actually helping me achieve the end goal. And so what we really want is a governance that can also be liberating and empowering, right? How does this governance make me maintain quality, but allow the freedom and experimentation that I need? And make sure that that arrives hot, just like my meal at a restaurant, and then allows me to scale. And one of my favorite stories about this comes from an analyst named Donald Farmer, who's ex-Microsoft and ex-Click, who I was talking to him about these issues, and he said to me, you know, Ben, I hear you talk and I think about my kitten. And I said, Donald, I have no idea what you're talking about. Why are we talking about cats? And what he told me was that he had just got a new kitten. It was COVID. He lives out in the Pacific Northwest with beautiful woods, and he'd look outside and he'd watch his kitten, and the kitten would climb up the tree and then would fall down, and then climb a little higher and then fall down. And he said, Ben, what I'm seeing is that the kitten wants to be curious, but they need the confidence to be curious, right? They're building up their confidence in themselves to climb higher and higher. And it's the same thing when we think about governance, right? We need to help people build up that confidence to actually be curious and to know that they're going to use data correctly and understand it, and make more of this liberating approach to what we're doing. And so ultimately, a lot of what we're talking about, we have to find the balance, right? We need to balance between innovation and experimentation, as well as consistency and usability and scale, right? And that's not always easy. It often could be, you know, we end up sometimes in these awkward data conversations. I don't know if anyone's been in an awkward data conversation, but where I talk to someone and they either tried to do something on their own or found data on their own or tried a new tool, and you have to sort of be like, I know this was really exciting, but here's the issues, or here's how we can do this better or think differently about it. And so when we have those conversations, we need to balance. It's almost like a hot new ingredient in the kitchen, right? If, I don't know, if kale is still popular or rhubarb or whatever it is, you need to acknowledge that might be the popular ingredient, but let's talk about how we use it or how we innovate it in. And one of the stories that I have from back at Target is that when I was early on in the digital analytics team, I built this cube, an SSAS cube, not complicated technology, that combined sort of digital visits and conversion with more of the order, profit, markdown, shipping expense. And it was one of the first times we looked at those two data sets together, and we really empowered people to explore on their own just using Excel. And it was awesome. People really loved it. I became identified with it. It was like Ben's cube, or Ben is the cube guy. And that's great. That's a great feeling, right, to have that sort of recognition. But one of the things, you know, about 6 months before I left, I actually sent out an email and said, you know, we're going to retire the cubes. And I was honest. I said, this is hard. I have a personal attachment to this tool. But things have changed. When I started in Target.com, it was $1 billion digital business. By that point, it had grown to like 5 or 6 billion. Now it's on its way to $20 billion out of $100 billion in revenue. So to think that my balance between those two things would stay the same as the business tripled and quadrupled and whatever was not, you know, important. And what I found is when I was transparent with the users who were sad to lose this tool, they were saying like, yo, Ben, I love that cube, but I really respect and am refreshed by this balance, right? By knowing that sometimes it's time to move beyond the innovation or to change. And so I think that's some of the balance you need to try to find. The other thing in all of this, and you know, it goes back to that balance, is you need to be open to new ideas. And one of the biggest issues I see sort of in the data and engineering world is sort of an intellectual hubris that we always know what's right. And so I always push our teams to say, be intellectually humble, right? It doesn't mean that the person's going to be right. It doesn't mean the new idea always fits into what we're trying to do. But if I approach it with that empathy, with that humility, then I'm actually going to make a good decision and not just sort of block out change. And so that's a big thing for me as well. And the last thing on governance is really that, you know, governance is never done, right? It's easy to say, oh, we have this governance project. I have a metadata project. It should never be thought of like a journey that's over, right? It is about the same way that the kitchen keeps on cooking and all those different things. It's about a constant process, so we should never be thinking about it that way. And so ultimately, what are we trying to do? We're trying to use governance to build your dream restaurant, right? So how do you have a restaurant where anyone can order any data they want, where it's prepared exactly how they like it, Maybe you make a suggestion now and again, right? Because not everyone always knows what they like. It's delivered instantly and piping hot, maybe even via takeaway. And it's not even hard work for the kitchen to do that. And I think this is an important point at the end, because I think often we get obsessed with sort of the business value, which is important. I would never say business value isn't important. But really what happens is you end up forgetting about your team, right? And so it is important. Like when I get to work with customers and when I was at Target, to see that joy when someone actually creates something that gets people excited about data, about what they're doing, that is an amazing, amazing feeling for a data analyst professional, right? And we need to remember that, especially in these times with the great resignation and turnover and trying to keep talent, that it's not just about how the kitchen operates, it's about how it feels for people to work in that kitchen. And you don't want to burn out your best kitchen staff, because then you're going to sort of be up a creek there. And so I promised 7 lessons from the kitchen, right? This whole talk sort of started with me saying, I've been messy for 20 years with data. What is it that I've sort of figured out? And so I'll share these parting 7 lessons with you, and hopefully you've sort of thought a little differently using this. Number 1, work to the same standards. And so this is a little funny little meme from the internet of, right, I was running late, I asked my husband to peel half the potatoes, right? He peeled half the potatoes. But it's just a reminder that we often can be saying the same thing, right? I say, cut the vegetables, or I say, grill the steak. We might be saying the same thing, we don't always mean the same thing. So we need to be really explicit about what are the standards, what am I looking at? And sometimes I actually like the analogy of sort of a data Tower of Babel, right? The biblical story. If you've seen some of the pictures they have out there, right, of like people building and different languages and different style architecture. And that's often what it feels like, right? We're all talking a different language. We think we're building one thing, but we're not on the same page. And so that's where working to those same standards can be really important. Number 2, cook with the eggs you have, right? What do I mean by this? Is sometimes we are waiting for the perfect ingredient to show up. We're waiting for the perfect set of skill set or the perfect tool or whatever it is. And that almost never happens, right? And so if I'm running a restaurant and I'm out of an ingredient one day, or my supplier, didn't have it or whatever it was, then, I still have to keep the restaurant running. I still need to start cooking. And so it's important to just say, look, this is what I have. What can I do with it? How can I move forward? And you just start, you cook a little bit, you figure it out, you see what's going on, and you sort of go from there. I think the other thing that this brings to mind for me is often, we have all this work to formalize data, but sometimes it's that one spreadsheet that's just as important as all of my formalized data combined, or doubles the value of that formalized data. And so part of this idea of cooking with the eggs you have is you need to acknowledge where your data is, what's important, and not just ignore it because it's not big data or because it's dark data or whatever it is. And so you have to continually ask yourself, what do I have and how do I work with it? Sort of the inverse of cook with the eggs you have is you still really have to think about the quality of your ingredients, right, and of your data. And so, I think data quality can be the killer product feature when done right? It's part of what you need to do and how you operate. And look, you're not always going to have the perfect things. I said that with keep cooking with the eggs you have, but you need to pay attention to it. And if you get something that's not of the quality you want, you can't use it right away, right? I think the other thing that's really cognizant to me, certainly in the retail space and overall, is that data quality is no longer about a mistake on a report or a bad analysis, right? Data quality in a digital world is about operations. Data quality is about, I didn't upload this data is wrong for an item and it's not showing on the website, right? So I used to talk in, retail, I would say, would you ever go into your store and put a sheet over your products so people can see them? But that's effectively what bad data can do in a digital environment. Same thing, when you start exposing your pricing in retail online, right? One change in one store for one item with the bad price can all of a sudden be exposed online and be picked up by something like Fat Wallet, and all of a sudden you've sold 1,000 units at 600-pound loss per unit. And this has happened for real. So again, it is focus on the quality of your ingredients, not just because it'll taste bad, but because digital world has sort of amplified what that looks like and what that means for us. Number 4, make it as easy as takeaway. You see what they did there? They made me not sound like an American, right? I wanted to say something else. And so we have to take sort of this consumer orientation to our data, right? I need to make it as easy as clicking on Amazon or picking something up at the store or ordering HelloFresh to use in my kitchen. And so we need to be thinking about how do we do that and how do we even learn from retail or from ordering, right? Can I have people review my data and my reports? Can I crowdsource which things are the most valuable? Can I use activity logs and other observability to understand the same way I would run a website, what's going on with my data? And so you want to make it, you want to take that sort of shopping mentality as you're thinking about your data. Number 5, a new gadget is not going to solve all your problems. As much as I might be up here telling you to buy a new gadget called Domo, right? And so it's just not, right? There's no magic wand. You can buy, I mentioned before, everyone sort of buys all these fancy machines and you wonder why it's not working. You have to look at what's innovative out there, but you have to start simple sometimes. When we were at Target, one of the first things we did when we started this data journey is we started just a message board. It might have been in SharePoint that was just called, "Where is data for?" Right? And people could just ask questions. People would say, "Hey, how do I know if there's a Starbucks at the Target store?" And someone would say, "Oh, I find it on this table." And they would say, "I don't have access to that table." And someone else would say, "Well, I think that's actually derived from this other table. Do you have access to it?" So it's just starting the conversation. That didn't require, millions of dollars of investment in new tools. It just required thinking a little bit differently. And so you have to remember, you evaluate new tools, figure out what you need, but don't expect some new gadget to solve it or to fix everything that you've sort of had going on there. Let's check time here. Okay. Number 6, this is a little bit of a stretch, but I like it. Talk more carrots, right? I sort of mentioned it before that we're often, governance is about locking down. Often we take this mentality of being sort of a gatekeeper rather than being the shopkeeper, like we were talking about before with more of a retail perspective. And so think about ways to incentivize people. So with that Target website, when you answered 5 questions, you got a t-shirt. It's a small thing, right? But you need to think about how am I incentivizing people to be smart and not yelling at them like Gordon Ramsay over there. And so my last lesson, professional cooking is a team sport. We saw that as people work together, and so is data governance, right? So if you think about in the kitchen, if you have the best staff, but the dishes are dirty and no one can see the preparation area, or the freezer's broken, or any of that, you need everyone to be part of it. Right? And it's not looking down. You can't look down and say, the dishwasher is not important. The dishwasher is important. And you need to think about all your data people that way. I think you also have to think about all your partners that way too, right? It needs to be a partnership. It needs to be this ongoing journey within what's going on. And so I guess with that, I brought a little prop. I'm going to invite you guys to maybe join us on the journey of cooking in this messy data kitchen, of exploring your data, be messy with us, learn about it. We did have a special surprise that we're going to mail for you, Domo spoons, so you can cook on your own. They did, how the supply chain issues are these days. We don't have them here right now, but we will get you a spoon as well, so you can join our team, be part of this team sport of data governance, and just continue to sort of embrace the chaos with some of these lessons. And so I'm happy to stick around and answer questions or be back at the booth. Hopefully this helped you think a little bit differently today about what data governance means. And I'm proud I got through it without making a Ted Lasso joke, because my 13-year-old said, "Don't make any Ted Lasso jokes." So I don't know if you guys watched the show, but thanks everyone. I'm happy to stay around and answer questions. And leave the hat on. What's that?